This a couple. Sorry, thank you. We're going to resume the Regional Services meeting for October 10th, 2019. No, not at 10th. That's the report I'm looking at. You know, today, the 23rd of October, 2019. We're on R3. Now, in the interest of time, Ms. Legault did make a suggestion that we could skip the reading of the resolutions, but if the board prefers or the committee prefers, we can go through reading all the resolutions as we go. But that's up to the committee. Is there a preference? Is everybody okay to read them off the agenda package? Okay, well, we'll try with that. If there's a specific resolution that we need to read, we can go through that, but just to save a little bit of time. So we're on to R3. And it's, I can take it away. We'll see what happens here. We're trying something new. Director Yanni DiNardo. Yeah, we'll use our microphones, but if we're on R3, I was going to say it's a report from Environmental Services Division, Memorandum of Understanding with Halalt Nation, and you'll see the recommendation before you.
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to R4, report from Environmental Services Division, read Director's request for meeting support, Eurasia Milfoil Management, and this one is for direction. We need to we need to provide some direction. There isn't even a resolution here I can read to help us move along. There is some analysis and financial considerations there. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the staff's recommendation where the budget of $2,000 be set aside for function 131 for the 2020 budget to cover meeting expenses and coordination should it be necessary, and that the first meeting in 2019 be arranged.
It's been moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Salmon. Any discussion? Director Nicholson.
What's 131 again?
Environmental Services. Director Acton, that was a...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to thank the board if they support this function. I did get a phone call yesterday from a fellow director feeling that this was maybe a regional, not a regional initiative, but in Shawnigan we have the largest electoral area, second largest in BC. We don't have a mayor and 6 council, so I believe a true leader comes and asks for help, and true leadership gives it when somebody asks. So I thank you in advance if you support this motion.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
I just want to clarify, this actually isn't a function. This will go under environmental services. The milfoil, Eurasian Milfoil Management is not a function. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. Thank you.
Director Marsh.
So environmental services comes out of general government, correct?
Regional service.
So I guess my only concern is, does it set a precedent for if there's going to be some kind of a remediation for Shawnigan Lake? The municipal areas have their own remediation things they need to do. Will it progress to that, or is this just for this meeting?
For now, and just to speak on precedent is only established by a board decision. It's a one-off. So the board would, any further funding of mitigation or work on Eurasian whalefoil would have to come to the board for approval.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have it moved and seconded that it be funded from Environmental Services 131. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion passes. R5, report from Finance Division, read 2020 draft budget review, function 100 general government, and there are 9 recommendations there. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if to get it started, but I wouldn't mind moving 1 through 5.
So Director Yanni DiNardo is moving, I believe those are the Tier 1 supplementals, 1 through 5.
Correct.
And those have been moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Staples. Discussion. Director Wilson.
Yeah, I need a little bit of explanation here on a couple of things. Administration and payroll support, I'm not sure what that is. IT security audit, okay, I'll go along with that one for the time being. A CVRD space plan for $60,000, that one doesn't make sense to me.
So why don't we go through each one, and I'll come back to you just to get the clarification points on the
Good.
3, but let's start with the first one, which was the supplemental administration and payroll support. So if I can put that through to staff. Mark's old school, he goes to the podium. No wireless mics for this guy.
That one never seems to work for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the plan was for the manager for HR department to talk about this issue, but since she's not here, I will try and stick handle it. And if she comes in the meantime, I'll let her at the podium. So at this point, we're having a bit of a crisis position in the HR department, specifically with payroll. Last couple of years, we've asked for an additional admin support, and to be fair, the board has been quite generous in the HR area, providing support, specifically last year. However, the feeling was that there was a big backlog in recruitment and the demand for hiring of people, both people retiring and people moving on. And when it's sometimes people are hired internally, then there's a shuffle or domino effect. So as a result, all the resources went to just simply replacement and hiring of individuals. So as a result, the min support and payroll is really quite floundering, and it's quite regularly requiring overtime, as well as there's been a few times when it's touch and go whether it's actually payroll is going to actually get done. And the other scenario is that a lot of analysis was actually done in regard of number of payroll people versus the number of staff and payroll checks we need to do on an annual basis or on a biweekly basis. And all the studies we tell us that we need more resources in this area. Having said that, there's another item in there called, I'm not sure if we ranked it as tier 1 or 2 at this point, but there's another scenario of we need to do a review in the HR department about how we do things and how we roll out individual duties and responsibilities to see if is there a more efficient way of doing it. However, in the meantime, we're in dire needs at the moment. So it's simply a backlog of information trying to keep things as efficient as possible.
Thank you. So I'll go back to Director Wilson.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, then there have been retirements and there have been people moving on, and those have been replaced or not replaced. This is a completely new position?
So this is the brand-new position. Actually, it's a part-time position. We have currently 2 part-time people in HR. This request is to augment those hours to basically move them both up to probably 3/4 time. They're already at full benefits already, so it's not like it's wages and benefits on top of that. So when I mentioned about retiring, that was in other areas. So all the additional staff that HR received went towards recruitment. That was what I was referring to in that area.
And Director, or Mr. Kieber's been stick handling it now. He'll pass it over to Ms. Mohan.
I'm happy to answer the question if I can hear it repeated.
So it was, go ahead, Director Wilson, just some clarification on the the supplemental, Tier 1 supplemental on the 40.
Yeah, so this is a
number.
brand new position to help out, and I'm just wondering why people have dropped behind. How has the workload changed so drastically that another person is needed?
So, two different answers. One, I don't actually envision hiring a new person. So this request is for additional hours to supplement 2 part-time positions, as Mr. Kieber mentioned. There may be, depending on how things work, I may hire a casual to fill in for absences, et cetera. That would be a new position. But this is really to take 2 part-time staff and move them to 3/4 or potentially full-time. So in terms of the workload that's changed, there's sort of as an artifact of the timing of our budget cycle and then the previous decision to prioritize recruitment over payroll, this has actually been a developing situation for almost 3 years. So we've had increasing staff numbers, increasing complexity of different kinds of payroll transactions, collective agreements diverging. So over the last couple of years, we've settled some collective agreements that now have different provisions instead of the same provisions, so that all of this adds complexity to the role. So the role was already, having to put in a lot of overtime to get payroll done already 3 years ago, and things have only just gotten progressively more and more busy for that role. So.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Mohan, that's great. This may be slightly out of line, but I know that a lot of private companies use outsourcing for their wages because that's all these other companies do. Is that a cheaper option, or is it allowed under the present arrangements?
Through the chair. So I don't think that there's any prohibition against it. It's not something we've considered in the recent past, because really beyond this staffing request, there's not a lot of hurdles about processing our own payroll. There is an additional supplemental request coming forward with my budget regarding an organizational review of the HR division, and that would be something, for instance, that review might tackle, is what kinds of services we provide at what level, and which ones we should be doing in-house, and which ones we might want to contract out. So certainly that is something that we would expect an outside consultant to come in and let us know what they think our best solutions are there. So.
Director Wilson, is it okay if I go to a couple other speakers? Okay. So again, we're just on those Tier 1 supplementals 1 through 5 that have been moved in second. I've got Director Acton and then Director Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will be supporting all Tier 1 requests, because my understanding is management has gone through it, and they are the urgent, necessary budget increases, but number 2s are not necessarily as urgent. And I'm finding it really hard for my brain so then we're getting presented number 2s, and now we are going to be looking at it how we don't have the numbers. So for me, I would like to see all Tier 1s dealt with throughout the budget season, and then we would have a figure, and then we can decide if we're adding number 2s. And does that make sense to people, what I'm
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
explaining?
I think I get it.
So if that appeals to other thinkers, that is how I would like to see this budget, because then we know what we're adding on top of it, and we know where we're at, where we stand.
Thank you. So you're supporting this resolution then that's on the floor, the Tier 1s. Director Kuhn.
I would just like to make a statement. I don't have any solution, but it's something that always baffles me around budget time, and that is there's constantly an increase for more staff, or a request for more staff. And I keep thinking the population growth in the valley is less than 1% per year. And I'm wondering, yes, we have increasing complexities, and yes, maybe there's more requests because of regulations or whatnot. But somehow it's very hard to justify increasing staff numbers when the population growth somehow doesn't justify it. So anyway, I just want to make the statement. I don't know what to do about it. I don't have a solution, and I don't know what could be done or if it is unrealistic or whatever. But it just strikes me because usually, if you look at any corporation or any undertaking, any business, if the client growth is very dismal or very low, then there's no justification to spend an awful lot more money. So anyway, I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. And for clarity, yeah, you're right. It's right around 1% according to the Health Authority per year for the whole valley. I know some of us grow at, 3% depending on the year. I think, I don't have it. Oh, I'll come back to Director Wilson and, Director Salmon right after that.
Is it me?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want some clarification, please, on the CVRD space plan.
Review. Yep. I'll put that through to Mr. Carruthers.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has been an ongoing issue that we've been facing, and I've certainly been making the board aware of it. As you know, we have had to secure additional office space in an off-site office to accommodate up to 10 employees due to lack of space here. There's a number of factors at play. We have the capacity for us to accommodate our current complement of staff. We also know that over a longer period of time that we will experience growth in our staffing. We have significant issues around the storage of our files and our records that we're attempting to deal with as well. We've also, as the previous board members will recall, some discussions around our Emergency Operations Center and the viability of having our EOC based here in the downtown core versus at another location. So we've been looking at all kinds of various options to deal with Bings Creek, to deal with space requirements here, to deal with our file storage. It just made strategic sense for us to take a holistic view of our space requirements and to look at the various options that we may have over the long term. Because if we don't start planning now, we will be in a situation where we will be looking to have to secure additional office space off-site. That's not conducive to a cohesive work environment where you've got people having to work in different locations. So the intent here would be that we would take a comprehensive look. We would look at all of the various options to do with this building, to do with the vacant property that we own on First Avenue, to look at the facility that we have at Bings Creek and put together a long-term comprehensive plan for space for the CVRD moving forward.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Wilson.
So is this study going to be done by the staff, or is it going to be done by an outside administration?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would bring in a space planning consultant to look at this and to put the plan together with input from our staff.
And just for perspective, we've gone through one of these because we've spread into 3 different locations, and we've got a couple of alternative recommendations for the town to move forward on. So I know that it's interesting because there's things like walk time that they start to calculate and how much it impacts people's days. And if you got 2 satellite offices, now you got staff walking you, or do you want them driving, and you take away, you realize that you're spending more than an hour of a staff member's day who's getting paid a decent wage in transit between 2 spaces, right? So it is good to plan those things so that you co-locate your most valuable staff as close as possible together. But in some of them actually go to the ridiculous level of laying out cubicles so that they have the best connection between the people that need to collaborate and work together. Yeah,
Why don't we amalgamate with Duncan and share offices? It seems a bit strange that they...
Thank you. Director Nicholson. Oh, sorry, Director Salmon, then Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to follow up briefly with Director Kuhn about the 1% growth. I share that concern because it does seem like our budget tends to go up around 5% a year, give or take, and more last year with the extra service. But I'm just sort of always cautious when I see, especially new staff positions. It's an ongoing cost. It's built in once it's done. So I assume our complexity in what we do is always increasing, but we've got 1% population growth, 2% inflation, and 5% budget increases, so just I don't know the solution, but the caution.
And Mr. Carruthers will provide some perspective, but I know that we also control the types and levels of service we provide to a certain degree. And I think sometimes we're guilty of creating that monster a little bit when we add new services or add new layers to the services that we have, but through to Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, I just want to assure the committee that staff never take these requests lightly. We are acutely aware of the sensitivity on the part of the board and on the part of our residents around the cost of our service. And much of that is people. We are a people organization. We are not mechanized. We deliver our services through people. And every time one of our divisions or one of our departments come forward with a request for additional staff resources, it's highly scrutinized. I feel for the division managers from the senior management team because we are asking hard questions and recognizing that we're going to have to come to this table and make a request of you to add more staff to this organization. There are a lot of drivers to what we do, and it's around the services that we provide, it's around the expectations of the public, and there's a lot of regulatory requirements that we're increasingly seeing that we're unable to live up to or to address. And every time we look at these requests, we look at other options, and often by the time it gets to this table, we've been dealing with it for 2 or 3 years. It gets to the point where it gets to be crisis and we're bringing it forward. I had a check-in with you last March and I was just looking through my notes in terms of the discussion around our human resources capacity. That was 2 years we've been having those issues and just to keep the board informed. So I just want to reinforce that we don't take this lightly, and when we do bring a request forward, we have looked at it closely. We have looked at other options, and it is at the point of there being risk to our operation or to our staff. Because what often happens in the sake of not increasing staff resources is that the people that are there doing the work carry the burden. And our staff work very hard, but we do get to the point where some of our staff I am personally worried about in terms of burnout, because they are carrying the load and they're dedicated and they will do whatever needs to be done to get the job done. And it's not fair to some of those staff to have to carry that load because we won't provide them the support they need to do the job adequately. So I just wanted to leave that thought with you.
Thank you. I have Director Nicholson and Director Haim. And then we can call the question on the first half of that one. No? Well, we'll everybody get ready to order dinner and maybe a nap. I've got Directors Nicholson, Haim, then Morrison.
Thank you. I'm wondering if, in this review, if we could take a climate change lens to it and look at greenhouse gas emission implications. And in addition, I think the healthy work environment side of it needs to be looked at.
Thank you. Director Haim.
Thank you. I agree with the approach suggested by Director Acton in splitting them up and voting on the Tier 1 now and considering later the Tier 2. My experience over the years is that staff do not take things lightly in bringing it forward. But having said that, one of the things that always comes up is the taxpayer's ability to pay, the resident's ability to pay. There's not going to be anything in the request list, in my opinion, that come from staff where somebody could say, oh, we never need that, or it won't make things better, or it won't make things a little bit more efficient. But to me, it comes back to that ability to pay at the end of the day. Now, sometimes there's implications related to that. If you don't expand space, sometimes there's inefficiencies in terms of trade-offs. But at this point, for me, it's seeing what happens to the overall tax rate as we go through the approvals themselves. Like I said, I don't believe you can really disagree with any of the requests. It's a question of whether or not you put it on the priority list to add to the taxation.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. And I'm just looking at our process here, and I understand the you know, we put a lot of hours in, and I just want to acknowledge that as Mr. Crothers has said, there's been a lot of due diligence put forward to this and the tiering of the various projects and the like. But I'd also like to warn against taking a fairly simplistic approach to it. I'm not suggesting what we have before us is simplistic, but that, you know, maybe looking at you know, preliminarily approving all tier ones, sending staff back, doing the calculations, and then coming back and maybe considering others. I've come to this process after a number of years knowing that we're probably going to have a couple of pretty intense looks at all of these budgets. And so I just suggest that if there's something that pops out that needs explanation and further detail, that we look into that. But I'm really reluctant for us to go through our process of just approving, you know, all the tier ones and saying, okay, come back now, let's start cutting. We should take the time to make sure that everything that we're putting through in this cut deserves to go through on this cut, and we'll make the process easier as we move along. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so again, we have items 1 through 5, the tier 1 requests under R5 that have been moved and seconded. I don't have anyone else on my speakers list, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And opposed, motion carries. Moving on to 6 through 9, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that number 7, we just finished discussing the problems that are happening in the HR, and it could save us money, likely, to do this review. It's a one-time, and I think that if there's been a lot of issues, maybe they could be addressed without us adding more to next year's, possibly, that I would like to move that the Tier 2 supplemental request for the Human Resources Division Organization Review for $15,000 be approved.
It's been seconded by Director Marsh. Discussion on that. Director Nicholson.
How large is that organizational division?
Through to Ms. Mohan.
There are 8 bodies in the division, but there are 7 FTE. So, because I have 2 part-time staff. So, and actually further through the chair, so there's myself, I'm the manager of the division. I have 2 HR consultants who are at this time primarily occupied with only recruitment. I'd love for them to be able to do other stuff, but right now recruitment is pretty much all they do. I have 1 payroll coordinator who also does benefits administration. I have 1 occupational health and safety professional. And then I have 1 HR consultant that does almost entirely casual hiring and summer staff hiring. And then I have a split position, which half of which is our administrative support for the division and the other half is payroll support.
Follow up?
So what kind of questions would you hope the review to answer?
Through the chair, there's a number of different questions. Some of the ways in which we organize our work in terms of how the different projects and recruitments are assigned to staff are, now that we have grown as a department and the demands have grown, they bear looking at. So the model that we use right now is we divide recruitment on the type of position, whether it's a full-time position or whether it's a casual or student position. So there's been some interest in the organization in assigning an HR professional for a particular division so that they have a client server basically within the organization. So that's kind of one of the things we would look at. We would also look at technology. So from my perspective, in the HR division, we're behind in our use of technology to support efficient business practices, but there's always a cost to implementing it as well. And up until this point, we haven't had the luxury of being able to do that trade-off, and I think that I would like a consultant to help us figure out where the best low-hanging fruit is from that perspective. So those are, and then things like, are there particular services which would be better contracted out or not? And also, finally, service levels in this organization have changed over time, internal service levels. So when I joined the organization, we were a highly decentralized organization, and as workloads go up in the various departments and divisions, the expectation for centralized HR services goes up, and yet we're not really equipped for that. So there's this question of how much service support do the departments need, and are we staffed for that, and are we organized for that? So those are some of the questions I would hope a consultant could help us answer. So.
Mr. Crothers?
Yeah, just further to that, some of the strategic HR initiatives that we've been unable to get to in terms of corporate training, in terms of performance management, some of those major initiatives that have long-term payoffs. And I just want to draw attention to 2 years ago, the board approved a very similar review in the finance department. And we had significant benefits from the results of that review in terms of restructuring, realigning positions to the point where we are much more effective, much more efficient, and actually increased capacity in finance to start dealing with issues that had been plaguing us for a long time around policies and procedures. So we have some recent success in taking this approach, pretty small investment, I think, for the potential benefit down the road.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else on my speakers list for this item, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Acton opposed. The motion carries. Now, we still have items 6, 8, and 9. If I don't see someone move one of those forward, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Could I hear from staff a little bit more about the tier 2, the corporate performance management software? Please?
Mr. Crothers.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So I've raised this issue with the board previously. We don't have a centralized or a comprehensive performance reporting system for the CBRD. I have my general managers reporting to me, and we have a system that we use. We don't have, other than our annual reporting system, we don't have a mechanism for reporting to the board regularly on the success and progress of achieving our strategic plan or our major work plan initiatives. Best practice in local government is that we would have a centralized system that we could readily assign tasks and readily pull reports and report out at various levels within the organization, whether it's to me as a CAO or whether it's to you as the board, as to where we are at any given time with our various initiatives. And it's a way of the board having a good understanding of what we're working on, and for all of us at our various levels of the organization to be able to monitor our progress and track our progress. So we would be looking at automating that process, and there are some really good examples in the province that have been very beneficial to local government in terms of doing that. So that's the proposal in front of you.
Follow-up, Director Yanni DiNardo?
Yes, please. I'd like to move number 9 as well.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded by Director Marsh. Discussion on number 9, and then I do have a speakers list that I'll come back to, unless it's on number 9 with the 2 speakers I already have. Is it on number 9? Okay, number 9? No. Okay, I'll go to Director Wilson, and then I'll go to Director Alternate. No, I know, he's already on the speakers list for number 9, and then Alternate Director Taylor.
Yeah, I'm not in favour of this one at all. Unless, let's say, for instance, it's going to, as Mr. Crothers has said, it's going to include all the managers and everything else. I see no reason to have it, unless I could, a resident phones me up and says, what's the station or the situation with my planning application, and somebody could say, well, it's at stage 5, 6, or 7, as opposed to what we see at the moment, which just says in progress. Does it mean that that would be incorporated in this, or is it just another one to say, well, he's doing pretty good and he's doing pretty good?
I think that was a question through to staff.
So, no, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't anticipate it going down to that granular level of detail. It would be across the organization. It would be for all of, used by all of our divisions in order to manage their work plans and their achievements and progress in achieving their work plans. So it has multiple benefits in terms of serving not only the administration, but also then getting the right system, you can layer your information so that we can provide high-level corporate strategic progress reports to the board, right down to divisional level action reports, and so that managers are able to keep on top of their staff and their programs. So yeah, but it would not be it wouldn't be specific to individual functions within the organization. And there are software and systems, and you've had some conversation about land use services and reviewing that operation, and that would be something that I would see coming out of that review. This is higher level corporate administration performance tracking.
Okay, thank you. Alternate Director Taylor. Microphone. Let's get your microphone.
I'm still on the learning curve. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if we should hold off on that until we have.
Sorry,
this-
people are asking and that you gotta move it closer because they can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if we should hold off on making a decision on that until we have this review that we just talked about earlier regarding relationships and so on, and find out whether or not that's the best sort of thing to be doing at this time.
Okay, so it has been moved and seconded, so it's good food for thought for the board. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, I'm gonna call the question. Oh, sorry, Director Nicholson? I thought you were, okay. Again, we're on number 9. All those in favor? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. With the quorum we have, that's defeated. So we haven't dealt with number 7 or 6 or 7, 6 and 8, sorry. My apologies, my check marks are running into each other, I'm running out of space. I do have Director Nicholson next on my open speakers list, then Director Marsh.
I'm dying to move number 8, the GIS orthophotos. I think it's really super important to have that function happening, and we approved it last time, but we didn't obviously give enough money for it, so it's really essential that this work happen. If you remember the affordable.
Can I get a seconder and then I'll come back to you. So it's been seconded by Director Marsh. Okay, now
Do
keep.
do you remember the affordable housing thing last year and the very embarrassing photographs we had of the electoral area part of the?
Enough said, just leave it at that. I've got, on this speaker's list, I have Director Acton, I believe. I saw your hand up, and then Director Wilson. Oh, sorry, my apologies, Director Marsh, then Acton, then Wilson.
Thank you, and I thank you for moving it. I was going to ask the question, what will we not be able to do or have? How would it set us back if we didn't have this, Mr. Carruthers, or whoever could speak to this?
Through to land use, oh. Like, is that a land use? No, it's GIS is IT related. I already ate all my Mars bar.
I anticipated quite a few questions, so I came prepared. We've had a hodgepodge of data collected from 2008 to 2016. We've got areas where we have no data. We did, a couple years back, we asked for a little bit of money to get the project rolling. We did go to an RFP process with other local governments in partnership, so there are some significant cost savings. And we actually, this time around, got some dollars back that we could talk about. So to do the entire CVRD area, which would include orthophotos, LiDAR, contours, roof lines, and planimetry, would amount to $248,631 to do that one time. Then once you do it once and you keep up to it, it's not quite as expensive. So doing it this way is a significant cost savings. Our member municipalities also participate in this initiative, and they have actually very good data. And if you look at their websites, their orthophotos are in way better shape than ours. By not doing it, we have missing data. We don't know what we have. We have outdated data. We're making decisions sometimes on data going back to 2008. That's 11 years ago. I think a lot has happened in the Cowichan Valley in 11 years. Not in all areas, but in quite a few of them. We want to set up a corporate data structure for GIS, so that would benefit planning and development, building, bylaw, public safety, economic development, engineering, and environment. Consistency of information is something we would want to provide and ensure that we stay up with it so we never get this behind again.
Follow up?
And thank you for that. And so would you say that without this, we're not really in line with most other regional districts in terms of modernity and the ability to move on these areas and improve them? Or am I getting it wrong?
I would say that we're not in line with most governments, whether that be local, provincial, or federal.
So this would be assisting us to be a little more 21st century.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have then Director Acton, then Wilson.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this request. Doing business in this way where we have taken Mr. Carruthers, ultimately Mr. Carruthers is who reports to us, and we have a directive, and he has outlined that he's standing behind the tier ones as exceptional, as very important requests. And then tier two, here have a second layer of importance. And here we are deciding which one of the tier twos is important and which isn't. And we actually don't have that kind of ability to make those decisions just by what we feel or this is, I think if we should have all the tier twos in front of us, and we should also have some recommendations as to which ones are more important than others and which will have a better return on investment or better value to our communities, et cetera. This is not a good way to make decisions in providing a service.
Thank you for that perspective. And I'll go then to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a great believer in GIS. I think it's great, but here comes the but. When we've used it before in my industry, we have always had a common provider. That common provider was a company called Jebco. And they had all the Bathy data, they had all the data that we needed on every part of every ocean that was been collected by NOAA or anywhere else. And I'm kind of surprised that what we've got is North Cowichan, and we've got Ladysmith and Duncan and everybody else who all seem to have their own GIS systems, their own GIS property, and there is no sharing as such. And I find it very difficult to understand why, if we are a regional organization, why we don't have one central point where all the information is kept and shared the costs as well. So I'm a little bit confused with that bit, but then also I have no idea what an orthophoto is, and I'd love to know, because it's $100,000. But is there any reason why we're not sharing data? Why we're not using a common provider who has all this data? And it would mean just like Microsoft, where you pay a common license fee. You don't buy this stuff outright and then pay the license fees to update it all the time.
Thank you. Through to staff.
So on this list, the Capital Regional District has the resources to drive this. So they went to RFP, and our portion for the rural areas, the electoral areas, is the figure I quoted. Duncan, Ladysmith, and North Cowichan all have additional numbers onto that. So even if it was one service, the cost would go up. Municipalities have different needs than regional districts, so this is pretty typical that they have their own systems. An orthophoto is actually an aerial photo. So when you go on our web map or you use Google Earth or anything like that, that is an orthophoto. It's a picture from the air, and the cost is increases the more clear it is and the closer it is to the ground, the higher the cost. So we try and balance it with data that actually is informative versus blurry.
Yeah, and just if I may, before I get your follow-up, we went through getting higher resolution ortho photos for our municipality last year. And the reason ours is different, like if we cost shared it, we'd have to come up with a formula because we have a lot more infrastructure, water, sewer, that isn't necessarily in the rural electoral areas or is varied in those areas. And the cost is much higher proportionately for municipalities, but we do share a lot of the costs on the ortho costs and stuff like that. So, but just a follow-up, or do you want to correct me? Okay, go ahead.
Just one other point to add, the software licensing for GIS requires that there be each local government be licensed separately. So there are ways to do it regionally, but the cost savings aren't there. You would still pay the same amount.
And follow-up, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, but you've also got, I think I heard you mention you've got high-resolution LiDAR and all sorts of other bits and pieces that are already in there. I'm just wondering what benefit this extra layer would bring to us, apart from having a photograph as such.
So we don't have LiDAR for all the areas. That is one of the things that we are missing. And as I mentioned, what we currently have, some of it dates back. There's a hodgepodge from 2018 to 2016 that was done as funding allowed and for specific projects. So you might look at a street and part of the street would be 2008 and the other street, half of the street might be 2016 based on how the project that required that data was done. So what we're proposing is to fly it holistically, so it's all done at one point in time, and then every 2 or 3 years update it. There may be some areas we say, okay, we only need to update them every decade or so because they're outliers. There may be others we say we need it every year because that's where the development is. But right now we don't have that information to make those decisions on.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm hoping all of us are following along on our electronic devices as well, because I'm looking at this, and perhaps it's because I've been to 3 budget meetings and been face to face with a bunch of taxpayers that I'm reading it, and this would be number 3 in the report, that this is really a request for $300,000 over 3 years. And it's a 4.34% requisition increase for the next 3 years. And you know, my concern is that I think after implementing the requisitions and not even fully on our new functions last year, that we have to be in a must-have position, not a like-to-have position. And so given that this is significant dollars and we're really early in our process, I'm fearful of the sticker shock, and I don't think I can support this one at this time.
Thank you. So any further discussion? Seeing, oh, sorry, Director Nicholson.
Yes, I wanted to ask why this wasn't Tier 1.
Through to the CAO. Why this wasn't Tier 1, the ortho photos?
So the primary test for Tier 1 would be, would we not be able to continue to deliver the service or be at significant risk? And we spent, I'll tell you, a lot of time debating Tier 1s versus Tier 2s, understanding the sensitivity of the board. And so if this was not to go forward, can we continue to operate? Yes, we can continue to operate. Are there risks? Yes. Are they, you know, profound, significant risks? No, we're going to lose opportunities. There will be a point in time where this may move from a Tier 2 to a Tier 1. But, you know, we had to draw the line somewhere. And so we had very, very rigorous debates about how we rank these. And it didn't meet the test of a Tier 1.
Thank you. Follow up?
So I happen to think that we're in the dark ages and that this is really super important for land use planning. And we really need to get better information. I know that our APC constantly says we need to have maps that are accurate with good information. And, you know, this to me is just basic doing business. So I really feel strongly that we should support this.
Thank you. Directors Acton, then Kuhn.
Mr. Chair, is it appropriate if somebody would support my motion to refer this back and to be brought back at a later date when we have a better idea of how our budget looks?
So the motion we have on the floor is to approve number 8. So if you're referring number 8 back to staff, that motion would be in order. But then it's up to the committee whether or not that a referral would be appropriate.
So that's my intent. So
Then you
I
would make
should
the
just
referral motion.
make the referral motion. Okay,
And
I'd
if
like
there's
to
a
refer it
seconder.
back to staff.
Seconded by Director Wilson.
Okay.
Through to staff, they have a comment to make.
Through the chair to Director Acton, these items, I would recommend if you're referring something, you'd refer it to the Corporate Services meeting in November for the November 21st and 22nd, when all of these items are going to be discussed, and that's when the finalization of the budget will be happening. So if there's items that you would like to consider and have part and maybe think about it at a later date, I'd recommend recommending it to that meeting.
Thank you. So it's, no, yeah, so you just add the date
Yes.
to that corporate services meeting. Is that okay with the seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion, as our chair would say, on the propriety of referral. Seeing none, I'll call the question on the referral. All those in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed. The motion carries. So that's been referred. We still have number 6 to deal with. I'll go to, my speakers list had Director Kuhn on it if he's.
You skipped me before the vote was taken. I would like to emphasize, I mean, it's done now, but this is silly. I mean, management went through this list and they determined that this was tier 2. And for us now to argue, well, maybe it's tier 1. I mean, what are we trying to do here? Why do we have management? They come up with recommendations, we look at it and we decide, okay, is it good or isn't? But to go back and now question their judgment, I think that is silly.
I appreciate that from your perspective. Any further discussion? We're going to try and see if we can get through. Is there anybody who wishes to move number 6, which is request for Legislative Services Secretary 3 for $76,487 be approved? If I don't see anyone move, then we'll move on. I don't see a mover, so we'll move on to R6. Report from Public Safety Division, and he's been waiting patiently. Thought he was going to get down here. Pardon me? So you want to go back to R5? Well, we've almost had 1 hour on our first item, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm wondering if it's worthwhile to refer back the tier 2s that are not accepted now so that management can decide which ones are more important. Like, so we're just taking it off the table. Well, I don't think we have the skills to
Let's ask
decide
staff.
which are more important.
So you're asking staff if they would recommend that we refer those tier 2 supplementals to that corporate services meeting or just move on? There's a question through to staff and then we'll come back to the speakers.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab. So some of these you've defeated. You've just simply said, no, we're not interested in looking at them. There's some that you may feel, in terms of priority, that you may want to have a second look at them, should there be some capacity after you've done the entire, so that's, I would suggest you would have a parking lot. You have some that you may want to reject outright, and you've done that with some of these, and some that you may want to say, I want to take them forward to corporate services and have them reconsidered in light of the final budget numbers.
So my direction would be, if you wish to have that consideration, to make the referral to the corporate services meeting that was mentioned, if you wish to do that. Okay, so that referral's been moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Marsh, to refer number 6 to the corporate services meeting of November 21.
Can I speak to it?
I'll let you speak to it, yes. Director Marsh, your microphone's on. And then I've got Kuhn and Morrison.
Well, my thinking behind it is, now
This is
we're
on the referral, remember?
on the
You can't sell
referral
the.
for tier 2, the Legislative Services Secretary. We're assuming that it's not as important as something else, but perhaps it is. So it's giving us that opportunity because our Legislative Services Department is challenged, and so is GIS. So it just gives us that opportunity. I don't know. I don't think that we should be negating ones over the other.
Thank you. Director Kuhn and then Director Morrison to close on the referral. So please make it on the referral.
Please, yes. I think what we're doing is we're just pushing off again. Eventually, we'll face the decision anyway, yes or no. And I've been saying at every budget meeting, every year, I've been saying we should be more comfortable with saying no. And here we are cringing when it comes to saying no. Man, the taxpayers are worried about this.
I know, I hear you. I appreciate that perspective, but I would ask that with the long agenda that we have, that we understand that we have certain perspectives, that we not try and re-litigate them on every item. Director Morrison.
Well, I hope this falls within the purview here, but might I suggest that instead of going through here and having a debate and then thinking, okay, let's approve what we're going to approve, and perhaps staff can do, as our CAO has suggested, create a parking lot of unapproved items that can come forward to that meeting. That way we don't have to litigate now and then litigate again. I think we have to be able to say no to things. And then the unapproved items can be brought together as a list, and we can pick off that list if there's room, which I highly doubt there will be.
I've already added up what we've approved and the room's out for me, but, so I don't know what staff response to that would be. Ms. Werner?
Through the chair to Director Morrison, yes, items can be moved over, but I would still recommend that the board go and defeat those items that they wish to defeat, not have all those items moved over to this parking lot. I would say at this moment, if there's times and things that the board wishes to defeat, I'd do that now.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on this referral, which is the Legislative Secretary 3, to the parking lot for November 21st, Corporate Services meeting. Any discussion? Seeing we've had a lot. All those in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. So then we still have the item number 6. It's not been referred, so I would suggest that we do, if we just move on, is that considered, okay, thank you. And staff's like, please move along. All right, now we're gonna get to R6. And just so you know, all of you, I'm just trying to keep a uplifted attitude, so if I chuckle a little bit, it's not at anyone here. It's just the fun of the process. I'm so excited. Moving on to R6, report from the Public Safety Division, re the 2020 Budget Review Function 109, Emergency 911, and that's been moved by Director Morrison. The recommendation, seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on this? Oh, I thought we could get this one through. Director Salmon.
Characteristically brief, but what portion, there's a mandatory portion of this 911? Does that cover the whole budget, or do we have any leeway whatsoever with 911?
Welcome.
So the question is there a mandatory component to this? Well, we've proposed the budget with the increases and decreases, as stated, to the purview of the board, what they would like to approve. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, just to clarify, I thought 911 was a little different in that there is a certain legislative, like provincial, we have to do 911 to a certain amount, or?
We're contractually engaged with other local governments to provide the 911 service.
Okay, but we still have leeway up or down?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to R7, report from Economic Development Division, re 2020 Budget Draft Review, Function 121, Economic Development. There are 3 recommendations there. Director Nicholson.
I'd like to move 1 and 3.
1 and 3 have been moved. Second by Director Staples. Discussion on 1 and 3, which is the core budget and the staff develop economic development sponsorship policy for the board. Seeing no discussion on those, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Oh, Director Taylor opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 2, if nobody was willing to move that, Director Morrison, does he have a seconder? That's the Tier 2 supplemental, $101,002 for permanent full-time economic development analyst for Function 121. So it's a new staff position and associated budget. So that's been moved. Did he have a seconder? I don't see a seconder. So the motion does not get moved forward, and we'll move on to R8. Report from Economic Development Division, re 2020 Budget Review, Function 123 Regional Tourism Services. The Function 123 Regional Tourism Services draft budget be approved. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Nicholson. Discussion on that. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Director Taylor opposed. Motion carries. R9, report from Environmental Services Division, re 2020 Budget Review. Sorry. How come we going too fast? I looked around the table. Okay. Do you have a budget cover sheet with all the resolutions on it? Oh, they're not? They are on mine.
So R8, you just pass,
Yep.
and does that include, my computer is not showing me, does that include the 20 extra, the supplemental, the 25,000? Where's that?
There is no supplemental there.
Yeah, there's a supplemental request for Road Canada.
Not under R8, there isn't.
Supplemental road.
Through to staff.
So that actually is a Tier 3 request. The direction from the senior management team was that Tier 3 requests would not be included in the recommendations this year. Discussion of them is included in the budget reports brought before you, so should the board wish to bring those forward, they can at the time they're being considered, but staff have not recommended them.
Can we move on to R9? And the report from Environmental Services, re-2020 draft budget review, function 131, environmental issues, and the recommendation is the draft budget be approved. That was moved by Director Morrison and seconded by Director Marsh. And Ms. Miller, you'd like to speak to it?
Sorry, earlier this evening, there was a recommendation with regards to the milfoil program for 2,000 to be added to the budget. So the recommendation came subsequent to the development of the report. So my request would be that we amend the budget to reflect the additional 2,000.
Okay. So that's been moved and seconded by the mover and seconder. You're okay with that amendment? Would be to add the additional $2,000 for the milfoil management to the draft budget. Any further discussion on that? Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear some more detail about the support climate conservation and natural hazard works.
Through to staff. Whatever's easiest for you. As long as we don't knock over his coffee over there. Welcome back. It's been a while.
With apologies through you to Director Kuhn, could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, the project expenditures increase of 55,000 to support climate conservation and natural hazard work. What does it entail, actually?
Thank you. As part of this year's work plan, we had anticipated completing the regional conservation strategy and looking at the development of regional targets. So that was moved to the 2020 work plan in discussion with the board when we talked about taking on the additional work required with Lake Cowichan Weir. So there's that component of it, so that's a portion of it, as well as we're in the process of wrapping up the regional climate adaptation strategy, and we'd like to incorporate some additional work with our municipal partners and the community in terms of going out to the public with the information. So.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. I believe we're on R10 now, report from Finance Division, re-2020 draft budget review, function 150. Moved by Director Salmon, seconded by Director Marsh. Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. On to our 11, which is report from Public Safety Division regarding 2020 draft budget for function 205, emergency planning. It's hanging out there. So I just clarified something with Mr. Carruthers, just so we all know, the core budgets that are not requesting supplementals were included already in that previous budget number. So just for clarity, that the core budget number that we've been delivered, it's only the supplementals, these draft budgets have been included in that core budget number. Sorry, did I see someone move it? I was talking to myself, so. Director Wilson, seconded by Director Morrison, and to speak to it, Director Morrison.
Question through to staff. I'm just curious, like, I'm thrilled that we have the SPU, but I'm wondering, and I don't know that I looked at the 5-year plan, is there any inclination to look at planning for another SPU for the Cowichan Valley?
Through the chair, not currently.
Well, that's concise. I like your style, man. Can you just stay up there for the rest of the meeting? Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to report from Finance regarding the 2020 draft budget for theater functions 435 through 439. And there's a 5-part recommendation. It's the 5 functions for the theater areas BC, ABC, North Cowichan, and Ladysmith. Moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director, that guy. Sorry, question, Director Acton and then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a printout that was given to us this morning, and it has Area B as paying less of a grant than Area C. I'm curious about that.
Somebody to speak to that. I have a question around this one too, because it has us, our requisition going down, but on paper it shows it going up, so. So this is the theater functions.
Function 436.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what paper you're referring to. That's just the operating reserve loans.
Oh, those are just operating reserves.
Oh, well, that would explain it. Okay.
Any further discussion? I think I had Director Wilson next, did I not? Why don't I go to Director Salmon and I'll come back to you. He's raring to go. Director Salmon.
Well, am I right? It's, B is lower on the requisition as well? This is from the staff report? No? Well, page,
I'll go through to finance
I
and,
was going to say, so if
okay,
I may.
everybody wants part of
I'll
this.
do the mathematical portion. So these functions are financed based on a formula. It's a bit interesting in that we're having this meeting prior to the commission meeting where this function will be discussed. But when the budget for function 426 is approved, then these actually are just done by a formula calculated based on the budget that's approved for function 426. And so they vary according to the 426 budget and also according to the assessments for each area within there.
And Mr. Elzinga wants to add some spice to that one too.
Ooh, spice, okay.
He's the program guy, so you know.
If I can, Mr. Chair, just to add to that when this function and these set of functions were created, it is in proximity to the theater function. So those areas that are closest to the theater pay half, those that are further away pay quarter of the function 426.
Thank you. Director Salmon with a follow-up and
just
then.
a follow-up, just
I've got
maybe
Director
the
Wilson.
history a little bit, like where's area D and E and F and, what's the?
Oh, you're digging up old wounds.
So function 426 has the core funders of Area D, Area E, North Cowichan, and the City of Duncan.
Okay, they're.
426 is the core area and then the satellite ones are these other functions.
The north end of North Cowichan and Area C pay half. Areas A, B, and Ladysmith pay 1/4.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I had Director Wilson and then Acton.
I would like to use a court response. I object to this. You know, it just because I happen to be closer or my community happens to be closer to a theater should be no reason why I should pay more. I'm sorry, and I'm sure you've got I know you've got an explanation. I know you've got a formula, but to be quite honest, I think that formula is very, very flawed.
You can speak to Jerry Giles, she'll explain it to you. This is a historic thing. The function, so staff can explain, but when the function was established, it was an agreed funding formula. And I believe we got elector assent under that funding formula, so the. Yeah, thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you. I would like to move that $30,000 of Area B reserve funds is applied to the requisition for this function, 436.
Okay,
That carried forward?
before we get a seconder, let's ask staff if that is possible under the, because the
So
function,
Our operating reserve policy does not allow for operating reserves to be used to fund ongoing operations. This is an ongoing operation, it's just the regular operating costs of the theater. So it's not a one-time cost, which we would recommend that the reserves be used towards.
But isn't it an additional,
Zero.
there's also the other function that Area B pays into for the theater?
okay, so I just ask you that you direct your questions through the chair, but if you can respond to that, I don't understand, so.
So to elaborate on the first question also, Director Acton may be looking at the wrong line. There is actually no operating reserve for the theater functions.
Can we move on? So, I'm sorry, I've lost myself. Ms. Legault, have we called the question on the theater funding yet? No? So I'm gonna get this one done, and then we're gonna take a few minutes to stretch our legs. My back is seizing up on me. So can I call the question on the theater funding? Thank you, I will. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Let's take till 1:15, so just about a 6-minute break. And this is yoga break, so it's out in the hallway. Thank you, everyone. I think we can resume. So I just want to make a note that it looks like the majority of what's remaining are just the core budgets. So not that I'm trying to not bring debate forward, but again, these are already included in our core numbers.
Could I make a motion, just put them all through? All at once at a time?
Sorry, through to Ms. Legault, is that in order? No, okay. Oh, there is a supplemental in R15, you're correct, thank you. R13 has been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Nicholson. Discussion on R13? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. R14, report from Finance Division re 2020 budget function 496 couch and housing. The recommendation is that we approve that. Moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion? Director Wilson.
Yeah, I'm not too happy with this one at all. I've seen no reports at all coming back from any of this association. I have no idea what they're doing, what they're planning, and what they're actually reporting on. I would like to see something from them sometime very soon. And I'm not going to vote in favour of this one until I see some documentation on what they've actually achieved so far.
Thank you. Director Kuhn.
The majority of the population in my area voted against this, so I can't possibly be in favor of it.
Thank you. Director Taylor. Just use your microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our area voted against it as well, and I guess I keep looking at Habitat for Humanity and the good work they've been doing around here, including past President Carter being up in Nanaimo this last year. And I think we're missing a bet by not involving them in it and without cost, and we could go ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'm seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Wilson, Haim, Taylor, opposed. And Kuhn. I was like, I was waiting for him. That motion passes. Moving on to R15, Recycling Waste Management Division, Budget Review, Function 520, Solid Waste Management. And there are 4 pieces there, including a Tier 1 and 2 Tier 2 supplementals. Director Nicholson.
I'll move 1 and 2.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. And anyone would like to speak to those two? Seeing none, all those, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I don't see Waste Services here, but, oh, sorry.
Mr.
The
Warge.
guardrail, is that for the same area that was having an issue?
So they don't back off the edge, is that the one? Mr. Warge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to you. Yeah, guardrail is for Binks Creek. So Binks Creek, it was built in late 1990s, so that piece, the guardrails have been there for that long, and they're coming to the end of their useful life.
Thank you. Director Haim.
Just a question through you to staff. In the core budget mention, it says primarily due to increase in internal allocation cost of $294,000 and change. Could you explain that to me, please?
Mr. Warge. Oh, or no?
Through to you, Mr. Allocation, if finance can help me out with this. So this is something that board has approved, and it's based on a formula.
Through to Finance, Ms. Silder? Or no?
Through the chair to Director Haim. Yes, earlier this year, the board approved a motion of the allocation for general government, and that allocation's been based on the previous year. which was his 2018 final expenditures, and it's 9%. And then there's a surcharge based on how many staff, so there could be an additional 2% as well put on that. So based on that new funding model, there was solid waste, which was one of the areas that had a difference in allocation for this year.
Follow up?
Is there something I can look at, a sheet, report, or otherwise that gives me a summary of those reallocations?
We can get it for
Yep.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion, Director Acton?
Yes, I would like to move that,
We have a motion on the floor.
well, I'd like to add where number 2, Tier 1 supplementary request comes from operating reserves, from 520, not requisition.
Is there
We
any
have
comment?
more than $7 million in operating reserves.
No. It's through to staff. Ms.
Oh, these are just expensive. Where's
Through
the
the ch-
reserve?
Yeah, through the
Okay.
chair to Director Acton, yeah, that is the operating expenditures for 2018. So
Okay.
off of that, we based the 2 and the 4, so there's only 284,000 in there. And you'll see that the recommended minimum is 1.2 million.
So we're about $942,000
Okay.
short. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion, okay, none opposed, motion carries. Director Marsh?
I would like to move that number 4 be referred to the budget meetings on the 21st and 22nd, please.
That's been moved by Director Marsh. We have a seconder? Director Taylor, would you like to speak to it?
I'd just like to say that I would like to hear again more about what this skid steer replacement means, and I think we'll have time to do that on those 2 days, and that seems like the responsible thing to do. I don't
Thank
need
you.
to hear it today.
No, we skipped 3. We haven't got, we'll go back to 3. That was just moved by Director Marsh. It's been moved and seconded to refer this to the budget meetings of November 21st and 2nd. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Morrison, Wilson, Taylor, and Kuhn opposed. The motion passes. Director Morrison.
I'd just like to ask a question about 3 in regards to the health and safety issues and whether there's the ability for staff to mitigate if we don't proceed with that, or if we already put that one in.
Mr. Warch, we haven't put that one in yet.
Okay, good.
Through to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So, so this is the service road that goes behind and around the Bings Creek, and it is the health and safety issues with the with all the sand and dirt that comes out. So what we've done is we actually have the truckload of water that comes out, and we sprinkle water maybe twice or more than twice a day to keep that. So that is an external cost, again, on a yearly basis. So we can avoid that by having the trucks, but that's not the only thing. The other one is sometimes you have the nails and everything else. It's hard to clean that up. The potholes and everything else, they are also damaging our trucks when they go through that.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo. Microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did consider, I see that it is 2-tier, but I have concerns like the health and safety and those issues, and I understand why the paving would need to happen. So I'd like to try to move this Tier 2, please.
That's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Director Morrison. I have a question then on that item. You mentioned just now some costs associated with having a water truck water that surface. Would there not be some kind of a savings elsewhere in the budget that would offset some of the cost of the paving, or is that just kind of absorbed into the operational costs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know exactly if I understood your question exactly. So you mean how we are going to budget this one, or the
No,
operation
so
costs?
if you do the capital work of paving that surface, now you no longer have to have that water truck and that extra work of doing that job. Is there not some savings from no longer having to perform that function that would offset some of the cost of the paving?
So that will be the miscellaneous costs, obviously the saving, but that'll go towards paying the debt for
Okay.
yearly.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
And just very briefly, I had an opportunity, I'm a regular user of the Meads Creek facility, and I just happened to be in at a bin where there was a bunch of spillover, and there was a staff person who was, I think, far simply able to clean up some of the overflow in the bin, and it was nails and glass and that sort of thing. So it's worth considering. I think there'll be some savings in the long run as far as staff time and also the risk of people getting injured.
Okay, we've had a good discussion on that. It has been moved and seconded. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Haim, Wilson, Taylor, Marsh, Nicholson, and Stone opposed, and Kuhn. So I believe that is, based on the numbers here, that would be defeated. Okay. Director Marsh.
Is it then too late to move that it be referred to the budget?
Unfortunately, I believe it would be.
Okay. I thought that's what Director
Just,
Yanni
I would say
DiNardo
if
was
somebody
doing.
feels they need to refer it, try and refer it before the motion gets,
Well, I thought that's the motion she was doing until it carried on.
no, sorry.
Okay.
Number R16, I believe we're on. Report from Environmental Services Division, re-2020 draft budget review, function 530 couch and flood management, and the recommendation is that it be approved. Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. R17, report from Environmental Services Division, re-2020 draft budget on drinking water and watershed protection. The recommendation is that function 532 watershed protection draft budget be approved. There's a number 2, that the tier 2 supplemental for full-time senior environmental analyst totaling $128,861 be approved. Director Wilson.
I'm moving number one there.
Number 1, been moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Acton. Discussion on number 1. Oh,
Hang on, I gotta bring it up.
through to finance staff.
Earlier today, the discussion around the water
Yes.
testing requires this budget to be increased by $5,000 for 2020, because the other costs would be in 2021.
So that amendment would be in order if I have a mover for
So
it.
if we could have the budget
So moved.
increased.
Sorry, it was 15 though, but you only need
That's
an.
2 years, so-
2 years, thank you. So they need an additional 5,000. That's been moved by Director Yanni DiNardo on the amendment.
No, that math is 7,500.
It would be 7,500, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Must be some funds in there.
Through the chair to the Director Morrison, it's, the first 2 years is $10,000 per year, and then there's a study that would take place after the 2 years.
Thank
So
you.
in the first year, it would be 5,000 per function.
Thank you. 5,000 for next year because,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that was moved by Director Yanni DiNardo. Do I have a seconder? Director Marsh. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Kuhn opposed. The motion carries. Now the budget, now the resolution as amended. Any discussion on that? Director Kuhn.
I'll be voting against this since the majority of my population voted against it.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Kuhn, Taylor, and Haim opposed. The motion carries. Director Marsh.
I would like to move that number 2 be referred to the budget day for a more fulsome discussion.
So the referral to the parking lot has been made on number 2, the supplemental for the additional environmental analyst, technologist. Do we have a seconder? Seeing none, the motion will continue on. I believe we're on Director Morrison.
R18.
Can I just get some clarification on staff on this one? Because it was my understanding that we didn't requisition the full amount for this year, but the plan was to come forward that we would be moving to this and adding if it was required. So I'm just.
Thank you.
Are we out of?
On R17, you're talking about the drinking watershed
Yes.
protection? Thank you. Through to staff. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to see if the CIO is going to comment, and it's a tangle of backs back there. The function has been approved. The referendum gave us the assent to do that. In year one, we're using the existing staff, a limited staff of Dr. Hetemi and myself. However, there is no staff allocated to undertake the work anticipated in this function. So it's a question of either do we stop doing other work, or do we take on additional capacity to undertake the work that we've got before us?
Thank you. And just for clarity, so that budget request, we're talking about the Tier 2 supplemental here, is included in the envelope, though, that was approved under the referendum. So this would be part of that step up in requisition. Thank you. Now, that has been, I believe, referred to, no, that was put forward and defeated. Okay, so we have clarity on that. So there. So basically, under the watershed protection function, we requisitioned not the full amount last year. This year, the plan initially was to requisition the full amount. Part of that would be this environmental analyst position. So if we do not do that, as Ms. Miller just indicated, we wouldn't have the staff member to carry out the functions of the function.
That was good. Thank you for.
Sorry, I've got a bunch of hands, so I'll come back to you, Director Morrison, because Director Nicholson was waiting. Do you have?
I was just going to ask.
I'll go to you next, because I had Director Nicholson, because Director Nicholson.
I just want to move it.
So
Number
it was moved and defeated though already, so. Oh, moved to be referred, thank you. I was like, is this out of order? And then it could always be referred once it's moved and seconded. So it's been moved by Director Nicholson, seconded, that the environmental analyst technologist position for 128,861 be approved. Discussion. Director Acton.
Yes, I'm curious, through Environmental Services, before the year is up, does a work plan come forward for 2020?
Thank you. We are currently working with Community and Technical Advisory Committee, as well as staff with the province of BC and our municipal partners, because it is a regional function, to identify what would be in the strategy over 10 years at a high level. We're anticipating that that input will be coming into us in early December and will be coming forward to the board probably towards the end of December, mid-December, end of December, with a proposed strategy and a proposed allocation of funds over that period of time. So yes, by the end of 2019 is what we're anticipating.
For your whole, sorry, Mr. Chair, for your whole department though, so that we could see in relationship to what this function, because what we just heard was if this is not approved, then it would draw staff from other areas to this. So to see the whole department's plan and priorities, I think would be an easier, a better way to look at approving this budget.
Follow up, or sorry, response, Ms. Miller?
Yeah, if I may, just to clarify, it's a group of 3 people, myself and 2 staff members. We've got 2 liquid waste management plan areas. We deal with the flood management program. We deal with the environmental services in terms of natural issues within the region, the hazard and risk management. We also deal with the new drinking water program and the existing South Cowichan program. So we've got a lot of portfolios. The challenge is balancing those portfolios with the staff that we've got on board. Certainly the discussions that we're having with the Community and Technical Advisory Group are making some substantial recommendations about additional work that we'd be taking on. It's one thing to spend staff time and capacity in a planning process, but it's quite another to actually start implementing. And so we're anticipating that either we look at taking on the additional staff load or cutting other programs. I think if we've cut over the years as we've taken on the 2 liquid waste management plans and the South Cowichan plan, the existing programs that we've been able to deliver are getting thinner and thinner with the existing staff load. So I think we're at a point of no return on some of them if we go a little lower. So we're not anticipating that we would be bringing that analysis back. That wasn't part of our original intent. I think although it does make sense at some point to look at the resourcing within that that group within the overall objectives of the CVRD.
Thank you. I have a comment from Mr. Carruthers, and then I have Directors Morrison, Taylor, and Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So it was always the intent, I think it was broadly communicated, that the intent of this service was that we would need to have capacity, and we opted in year one to not fill that position and to do some strategic planning and preparation. We will be significantly hamstrung to deliver the services, particularly as the Community and Technical Advisory Group make their recommendations to the board. We are fully subscribed in environmental initiatives, so something will have to give. And again, this was always the intent, that we would have one and potentially two, depending on what the work program looks like. But at the very least, in order to deliver this service, we are going to have those staff resources to deliver the programs and also to provide our referral response, the kind of technical advice that we're going to need to deal with our water issues.
Thank you. So I just have a question, and I'll go to the speakers list, which I just went out. I've added Director Marsh. When I look at the core budget that we've just approved, it shows additional staff resources at $128,861. So I'm confused because we just passed a core budget that shows this 28% increase, mostly related to staff position and associated costs. So this other position is in addition to that staff? I'm just looking at the draft budget for the 532, which has $128,000 of staff allocated to it already, and an increase of 28%.
Oh,
Through to finance?
that is the supplemental item. The core increase for this budget is only 2.5%.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying, I just look at the actual report here. Oh, max requisition if supplemental approved. My apologies. I thought we found already built in. No. Okay, I'll go to the speakers list. Director Morrison, then Taylor, Wilson, and Marsh. Director Morrison.
Yeah, I'll be brief. We compromised, we reduced the requisition last year, and the full intent was that we weren't going to try and download this onto environmental services staff. They were already, they had a full portfolio of work to do, and this is the hire that was anticipated. And if we don't approve this, then what work are they doing? That's it.
Thank you. Director Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm looking at this and I got a question. Full-time senior environmental analyst. What are the implications there for a full-time appointment? Is there a periodicity to it? Is it a 5-year appointment, 10 years, or perpetual?
I believe it's a permanent full-time position. Yeah.
So it could be going on 10 years and $1 million.
It would be $128,000 a year, and then I would believe this would be in a union position, the standard collective bargaining would apply from that time forward.
I mean, $1 million is light.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the referendum did approve the function funding at $750,000. I believe the total requisition here would still be under that limit based on the supplemental. But that's just for clarity. Appreciate the question.
No, I think then maybe there should be some consideration to reassessing the amount that we want to be putting into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Taylor has actually brought up a point I was going to bring up as well. I don't like the idea of more and more full-time staff. I would much rather, and I'm not arguing that we don't need this or whether we do need it. If the staff say we need it, we need it. But I would much rather see this go to a contract position where when the situation arises, and it will arise, that maybe we don't need this full-time position anymore, then under contract it gets terminated. It just doesn't carry on. Oh, we'll just shift you around to do with this. I don't like the idea of a permanent full-time analyst here at all. I'd much rather see this go on a contract basis.
Thank you. I have Director Marsh and then Director Salmon.
So I think I heard the chair say this motion could potentially be referred. Is that correct, Ms. Legault?
Well, it's a motion that's now in order, so any motion that's on the floor can be referred.
Okay, so I actually, I haven't counted the votes, but I'm very aware that 2 very valued members of this board had to leave today because of emergencies in their family. And I think that out of respect, and we have another individual.
Two more, actually, yeah.
Yeah, not here. And I'm of the view, and maybe you don't all share it, but whether or not a particular area voted in favor, although I do think most of them did vote in favor of the watershed, but even if they didn't, I really think that those other people's representatives, those other areas have a right to have their representatives debate this. This isn't the, if this was the end date, then maybe we could argue. So I would like to refer it this.
Okay, so
so
you're
we can
making
have
a
a fulsome
motion to
discussion.
refer the resolution on the floor. That's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Nicholson. Now,
So
we're
if I-
only discussing the referral now, propriety of referral,
Well,
not debating the merits of the position.
Exactly, and I was beginning to do
Yeah,
that.
I think you
when
already-
we're down 4 people, the respectful thing to do to the community who's very concerned about water is to have a fulsome debate when we're all here.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Haim, Taylor, and Wilson opposed. The referral passes. Moving on to R14. Nope. Where am I now?
18.
I've been electronic. I get to go back to paper.
R18.
R18, report from Environmental Services, re 2020 budget review, function 535, Central Sector Liquid Waste Management, and this is just a core budget with no supplementals.
So moved.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo. Microphone was on, good timing. Seconded by Director Nicholson. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. R19, report from Engineering Services on 2020 budget, draft budget review, function 571, asset management. The recommendation is that we approve the draft budget. Moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director Morrison. Discussion. Director Wilson.
Yeah, I see a lot of this stuff about asset management, and this has been one of the things that I've been very interested in over the last few months, especially with what we've got and what we haven't got, and who knows what we've got. And as far as I can see, so far there are a couple of departments who have no idea what they've got. So the sooner this asset management moves into the stage where it's actually recorded as to what we've got, the better.
Absolutely, and condition assessments and everything are critical as well. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. I would clap, but that would be out of order. I will move on. I don't believe we have any other new business, so we'll move to question period. Question period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and out of respect for your long day, I'll keep it very brief. The CAO talked about the crisis within the CVRD staff, and, that he's very concerned about them, but I didn't see anything in the budget about employee assistance programs, and just wondering how the needs of your staff are being met.
Thank you. We have health and wellness programs and committees that are already working on those issues with staff, including feedback loops of how they're feeling. I think it's just a sense of the division managers and the senior managers that come through the CAO that some of them at times are stressed, especially in certain departments which have been well discussed. And they're trying to address that through hiring. So I think most of that conversation, without referring to staff inappropriately, is about ensuring that there's the right supports there in the HR to get the hiring done, to alleviate some of those concerns. But I know the Health and Wellness Committee, is Ms. Mohan still here? No. But we have had discussions on that, and they are continually working on and monitoring that. And that's how they have that sense that they need a bit more help.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure. Just to speak to the ortho photos, I would hope that the board gives serious consideration to it, because I know as a member of an APC, it comes up repeatedly when we get packages and we have ortho photos that are out of date. So I would hope, Mr. Chair, that because we hear staff are referring to Google Maps.
And
And that's a little bit
and
embarrassing
to
for an organization.
To
such
frame
as
it in the
this.
form of a question, I would hope you would do that, won't you?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been long for us too.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Question period. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, Ms. Bell Irving. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Vociferously and excitedly moved by several. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? We are adjourned.